You've heard the word Islam 1,000 times, in the news, in political speeches, in conversations that turn tense the moment the word is spoken. But here's the question. What if most of what you think you know is only half the truth? What if Islam is not just a religion from faraway lands, but a living, breathing tradition that touches nearly every corner of the planet, from the markets of Istanbul to the streets of Chicago, from the deserts of Arabia to the heart of Indonesia? And here's the twist. The Islam you've been shown by headlines and stereotypes is just a shadow. The real story, the one lived by over 1 billion people every day, is far richer, more complex, and more human than you've ever imagined. In Following Muhammad, Carl W. Ernst pulls back the curtain. He takes us beyond fear and fascination, into a world of sacred texts, ethical values, spiritual beauty, and a vision for the future that might just change the way you see faith itself. The journey begins here, and by the end, you may discover that understanding Islam is not just about them, it's about understanding all of us. But before we dive deep into this fascinating journey, I have a small request. Please tap the like button. It might seem like a tiny action, but it helps this story travel far and wide, reaching more people who are eager to learn. And together, we can keep the light of knowledge shining. Chapter 1. Islam in the Eyes of the West. When people in the West hear the word Islam, a flood of images and ideas often rushes to mind. Some picture ancient deserts, bustling bazaars, and call to prayer echoing across rooftops. Others think of political conflict, veiled women or strict religious laws, and many, sadly, think only of terrorism, a link built by decades of selective news coverage and political rhetoric. Carl W. Ernst begins here because this is where many misunderstandings take root. He shows us that the Western view of Islam did not appear overnight. It has been built slowly, layer by layer, over centuries, through wars, colonization, literature, and now the 24-hour news cycle. A history of otherness. During the medieval Crusades, Christian Europe and the Muslim world were locked in conflict. Propaganda on both sides portrayed the other as dangerous, godless, or barbaric. Later, when European empires colonized Muslim lands in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, they described their rule as civilizing, reinforcing the idea that the West was advanced and the Muslim world was backward. Even literature played a role. 19th-century novels and travel diaries often described Muslim societies as exotic, mysterious, and sometimes threatening. These impressions stuck. The modern media problem. Fast forward to the present. Most Western audiences do not meet Muslims in person. They meet them through television, newspapers, and online headlines. Unfortunately, violence and political tension make for better news stories than daily life, so the image of Islam becomes linked to crisis and conflict. Ernst points out something important here. This narrow picture ignores the everyday lives of over 1 billion Muslims, people who go to work, raise families, study, and live with hopes and fears just like anyone else. Stereotypes work both ways. Ernst is careful not to make this a one-sided blame game. He notes that just as the West stereotypes Islam, many Muslims also have stereotypes about the West, seeing it as morally corrupt, spiritually empty, or hostile. These mirror images feed each other, creating a cycle of mistrust, replacing suspicion with curiosity. The heart of Ernst's message is simple. If we want to break this cycle, we must move from suspicion to curiosity. Instead of asking, why are they like that? We can ask, what's their story? Instead of seeing Islam only as a political issue, we can approach it as a human reality, a religion that inspires art, architecture, music, scholarship, and acts of compassion. Why this matters now. In our interconnected world, Muslims and non-Muslims work together, live in the same cities, and share the same global challenges. Misunderstanding each other is not just a cultural problem. It can lead to political tension, discrimination, and even violence. Ernst leaves us with this thought for the next chapter. To understand Islam, we must learn to see it on its own terms, not only through the lens of Western history or media. That means asking better questions. looking at reliable sources, and listening, truly listening, to Muslim voices. Chapter 2. Approaching Islam in terms of religious studies. Most of us first learn about religions in one of two ways: through the teachings of our own community, or through the news and public debates. Both are important, but both are also limited. Carl W. Ernst suggests a third way, the religious studies approach, where we study Islam as a religion with fairness, depth, and context, much like a historian studies the past or a scientist studies nature. What is the religious studies approach? This approach does not begin with judgments about whether a religion is true or false. Instead, it asks, how do people experience this religion? What do its sacred texts actually say? How do its followers practice it in daily life? How has it changed over time and across cultures? By doing this, we can see Islam not as a monolithic block, but as a living, diverse tradition, a global faith, many faces. Islam is the world's second largest religion, with over 1 billion followers, but it is not practiced in the same way everywhere. In Indonesia, Islam blends with local customs, music, and art. In West Africa, it may be deeply linked with oral poetry and community leadership. In the Middle East, it is often connected to Arabic language and ancient history. In North America and Europe, Muslim communities adapt to secular laws and multicultural societies. This diversity shows that Islam is not a single uniform culture. It's a global family of cultures tied together by shared beliefs. The problem with extremes. One danger of ignoring the religious studies approach is that we might judge a religion only by its extremes. Just as Christianity should not be defined only by the Inquisition or violent groups, Islam should not be defined only by acts of terrorism. The media often focuses on the most sensational events, leaving out the millions of peaceful, compassionate, and creative expressions of the faith. Balancing insiders and outsiders. In studying religion, Ernst highlights the importance of hearing both voices. Insider voices, how Muslims describe their own faith and meaning. Outsider voices, how historians, anthropologists, or sociologists analyze the religion. Neither is complete alone. Together they give a fuller, more honest picture. Why this matters. Without a fair, well-rounded approach, misunderstanding grows, and misunderstanding can turn into prejudice, which in turn can affect politics, law, and social harmony. By treating Islam as a serious subject of study, just like we would study art, history, or science, we begin to see it as it truly is, a complex, evolving, and deeply human tradition. Looking ahead. In the next chapter, Ernst will take us to the very foundation of Islam, its sacred sources, the Qur'an and the Hadith, to understand not just what they say, but how they shape the daily lives of Muslims across the globe. Chapter 3. The Sacred Sources of Islam. Every religion has a foundation, the roots from which its teachings grow. For Muslims, those roots are two sacred sources, the Qur'an, the holy book of Islam, the Hadith, the recorded sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad. Carl W. Ernst explains that understanding these two sources is key to understanding the faith itself. The Qur'an, the Word of God. Muslims believe the Qur'an is the direct Word of God, revealed in Arabic to the Prophet Muhammad over 23 years in the early 7th century. It is not arranged like a storybook. Instead, it is a collection of chapters, called surahs, that mix guidance, moral lessons, spiritual reflection, and reminders of God's power and mercy. The Qur'an is recited aloud in a rhythmic, almost musical style, something deeply moving for believers. Even if someone doesn't understand Arabic, the sound of the recitation carries a sense of the sacred. The Hadith, the Prophet's example. While the Qur'an is the primary source, Muslims also follow the Hadith, detailed records of what the Prophet Muhammad said, did, and approved of. If the Qur'an is the map, the Hadith is the guidebook showing how to walk the path. For example, the Qur'an commands prayer. The Hadith describes how Muhammad prayed. The Qur'an promotes charity. The Hadith tells stories of how Muhammad gave to the poor. Over time, scholars collected thousands of Hadiths, but they also carefully checked them for authenticity. Some were considered strong and reliable, others weak or doubtful. Interpretation and schools of thought. Here's where it gets interesting. Different Muslim communities sometimes interpret the Qur'an and Hadith differently. Some focus more on the literal meaning, others emphasize the spirit behind the words. This has led to various schools of Islamic law, Sharia, each with its own approach but all rooted in the same two sources. The Prophet Muhammad, the living example. The life of the Prophet is central to Islam. Muslims see him as the perfect model of humility, justice, mercy, and trust in God. While he is not worshipped, worship is for God alone. He is deeply loved. Sending blessings upon him is a common daily practice. Why these sources matter? Ernst reminds us that these sacred sources are not just historical documents. For Muslims, they are living guides. The Qur'an is recited in daily prayers. The Hadith is used to inspire personal behavior. Together, they shape not only religious life, but also ethics, culture, and community traditions. Looking ahead. In the next chapter, Ernst shifts from sources to application, how the ethics of Islam influence real-life issues like justice, compassion, family, and the economy. Chapter 4. Ethics and Life in the World. Religion is not only about what happens inside a mosque, church, or temple, it's also about how we live in the world. In Islam, ethics, the moral principles that guide human behavior, are woven into everyday life. Carl W. Ernst shows that these principles are not abstract ideas. They are practical, lived values that shape relationships, business, governance, and even how people treat the environment. Core values in Islamic ethics. While there are many teachings, Ernst highlights a few that are central. Justice, adl. Every person must be treated fairly, whether friend or stranger. Standing against oppression is considered a duty. Compassion, rahmah. Mercy is a key attribute of God, and Muslims are encouraged to show it to humans, animals, and the earth itself. Honesty, sidq. Truthfulness in speech, trade, and personal dealings is a religious obligation. Charity, zakat, and sadaqah. Helping the poor is not optional. It's part of being a good Muslim. Zakat is a formal yearly donation, while sadaqah can be any voluntary act of kindness. Ethics in daily life. These values influence many areas of life. Family, respect for parents, care for children, and strong marital bonds are seen as acts of worship. Business, fair contracts, avoiding fraud, and fulfilling promises are moral duties. Law and governance. Justice is meant to be impartial, applying equally to all. Environment. The Qur'an describes humans as caretakers of the earth, not its exploiters, balancing rules and spirit. While Islamic law, Sharia, offers specific rules, Ernst reminds us that the spirit of these laws is equally important. Following the rules without compassion or fairness misses the point. For example, giving charity just to tick a box is not the same as giving with genuine care for the recipient's dignity. Ethics and diversity. Different Muslim societies express these values in different ways. In rural Africa, charity might mean feeding a neighbor's family for weeks. In urban Malaysia, it might mean funding a scholarship for students. The core values are the same, but the methods adapt to culture and circumstance. Why ethics matter today. In a time when politics and religion are often mixed in heated debates, Islamic ethics offer a reminder that faith is not only about belief, it is about action. The real measure of a believer, Ernst suggests, is how they treat others, especially the vulnerable. Looking ahead. In the next chapter, Ernst takes us deeper into the heart of Islamic spirituality. Beyond laws and ethics lies the inner dimension of the faith, where the goal is not just to live well, but to be transformed within. Chapter 5. Spirituality in Practice. Laws and ethics guide our actions, but for many Muslims, there is another dimension, the inner journey, the deep connection with God that shapes the heart. This is where spirituality comes in, and in Islam, much of this is expressed through Sufism, the mystical path. Carl W. Ernst explains that Sufism is not a separate religion. It is a way of living Islam with intense love and awareness of God. It focuses less on what you do and more on how and why you do it, turning everyday acts into steps towards spiritual closeness. The goal, nearness to God. In Sufi thought, the ultimate aim of life is to know God, not just in theory, but through direct personal experience. This is called marifa, deep spiritual knowledge. It's not about memorizing rules. It's about transforming the heart so that one's actions naturally reflect love, mercy, and truth. Practices that nurture the soul. Sufis have developed many practices to stay aware of God's presence. Dhikr, repeating the names of God or verses from the Qur'an as a form of meditation. This can be done quietly or in rhythmic group recitations. Sama, listening to devotional music or poetry to inspire the soul, famously seen in the whirling dance of the Mevlevi dervishes in Turkey. Service, helping others without seeking reward, seeing every act of kindness as service to God. The role of poetry and art. Sufi poets like Rumi, Hafez, and Bulleh Shah have expressed spiritual truths in verses that still inspire millions around the world. Their poems speak of longing for the divine as one might long for a beloved, using the language of love to describe faith. Art, calligraphy, and architecture in the Muslim world often carry this same sense of beauty as devotion, balancing outer and inner faith. Ernst emphasizes that spirituality in Islam is not about escaping the world. True spirituality should make a person more compassionate, just, and humble in daily life. Prayers, fasting, and charity gain deeper meaning when they flow from a heart full of love for God. Misunderstandings about Sufism. Some people think Sufism is only about dancing or poetry. Others see it as a soft version of Islam. Ernst clarifies that Sufism is deeply rooted in the Qur'an and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. Its focus on inner purification complements the outer practice of law and ethics. Why spirituality still matters. In today's busy, noisy world, where religion is often reduced to rules or politics, the spiritual side of Islam offers a reminder. Faith is ultimately about transformation, becoming a better human being, connected to the Creator and compassionate toward creation. Looking ahead. In the final section, Ernst invites us to think about Islam in the 21st century, its challenges, its diversity, and how it can be reimagined for a more peaceful future. Postscript: Reimagining Islam in the 21st century. The world today is connected like never before. People from different religions and cultures share neighborhoods, workplaces, and digital spaces. Yet misunderstandings about Islam remain strong and sometimes even grow louder. Carl W. Ernst ends this journey with a challenge and a hope. The challenge. Islam faces both external and internal struggles. From outside, there is Islamophobia, fear and suspicion fueled by stereotypes, political agendas, and incomplete information. From within, there are debates among Muslims themselves. How should the faith adapt to modern life? Which traditions must be preserved and which can evolve? In a world of rapid change, finding common ground is not easy. The hope. Ernst believes that the example of the Prophet Muhammad offers a timeless guide. He was a man of justice, humility, and compassion, qualities the world desperately needs today. If Muslims live these values, and if non-Muslims approach Islam with openness and curiosity, new possibilities for understanding can emerge. Steps toward a better future. Mutual respect, listening without rushing to judge. Education, learning from reliable sources instead of relying on rumors or biased headlines. Celebrating diversity, recognizing that Islam is not one single culture, but a global mosaic of voices and traditions, a final reflection. Following Muhammad is not about proving a religion right or wrong. It's about looking past the noise, past the headlines, and seeing the human reality. Islam is more than a political story. It is a faith lived daily by over 1 billion people, each with their own hopes, dreams, and struggles. Understanding Islam, Ernst reminds us, is not only about Muslims. It's about building bridges in a divided world, one conversation, one act of empathy, one open mind at a time. And so the journey ends where it began, with a question. Not, what do I think about Islam? But, what am I willing to learn? Because the answer to that question might change far more than what we know about one religion. It might change how we see the whole human family.